Hello and welcome back to our next English lesson. And today we're going to continue to try and understand the model text. And we're going to have a look at the key vocabulary that comes up throughout the model text. Now, I haven't picked up every single word, but quite a lot of the words I haven't picked up on are very specific to this time period, and so are explained within the text itself if you think carefully. So let's have a look at the text one more time. So here we have it, the Anglo-Saxon Society. The Saxon people didn't all have great lives. Wealthy or not, all of them had endured some hard times. Despite this, society was split into three categories: the Saxon nobility and the upper class, e.g., the kings, aldermen, and thanes, like landlords. Next were all the commoners, who were the ceorls, who were the group consisting of farmers and craftsmen. Lastly, slaves, thralls, whose lives were hard and mostly miserable. Social hierarchy. Overall, the social hierarchy in Anglo-Saxon England was regarded fair and created a perfect solution for two main needs at the time. One was the organised workforce, whose duties were defined clearly by their stations. Secondly, an army which could be constructed and taken to the field with minimal preparation. Commoners. Commoners in the Anglo-Saxon period, known as ceorls, were the craftsmen and farmers. These were the majority of people. While some were successful landowners, there were some that were not that wealthy, living as agricultural labourers under the landlord's rights. Although all were craftsmen and farmers, they could all be summoned to join the fray. And if they were called, they were required by law to join. The Fred was an army of poorly armed fighters who had not undergone any training at all. The commoners could not afford their own weapons and armour, which meant their chances in a fight were not great. The best weapons they were able to acquire were spears, but most were only armed with hammers, axes, and scythes, which were easily accessible through their work. Nobility and the upper class. Anglo-Saxon's upper class and nobility consisted of kings, ealdormen, and thanes. The nobility was led by kings who ruled over large areas of land called kingdoms. Next were the aldermen, who controlled various districts on behalf of the ruler. The aldermen had significant power that was often responsible for law and order, therefore were tasked with providing justice. They were also in charge of the militias, which was formed by the locals, commoners in times of war. Below the ealdormen were the thanes. The thanes were the professional military in service to either the king or the ealdorman. Some served the king and had the possibility to gain a place in the king's home, while others owned lands in their own rights. These thanes had the duty to create a solid foundation for the army and to fight for the kingdom. When they were not actively on duty in the military, they took care of local organisations, both of men-at-arms and trade routes. Slaves. The bottom of the structure of society in Anglo-Saxon times consisted of the slaves, who were called bondsmen or thralls. Slaves were either prisoners captured during wars, Britons, native from Great Britain, or Saxons falling into debt who literally had to sell themselves into slavery. They did not have many rights under law, and they could be harshly punished without any thought of justice. Punishment, which includes being killed, was easy to receive for slaves. So this is on model text, and within here there's quite a few words. So what we're going to do is going to look at a bit at a time and pick apart some of those words just to help our understanding. The things like ealdormen and thanes, they are explained within this. The same with thralls, meaning slaves, or bondsmen, those people who had fallen into debt and sold themselves into slavery. All of these have been explained within the text itself. So what we're going to look at are some of the words which aren't explained. So let's have a look at this section first. In the beginning, our introduction and our first paragraph that we've got. Our first word we're going to look at is endured. So all of them had endured some hard times. And what endured means is suffered something painful or difficult, and they suffered it painfully, patiently. So it's living through something hard or painful. Our next word is nobility. And this is a group of people belonging to the highest social class in the country. And you can see this in the fact that within the nobility are the kings and ealdormen, who are the highest that can be within the social structure. And our next word is hierarchy, which is an interesting word. It's the system in which members of an organization or society are ranked according to their relative status of authority. So what hierarchy is that build-up of society, with your lowest level being the slaves, the next level up being commoners, then thanes, then ealdormen, and finally at the very top, your king. And it's called a hierarchy because there tends to be less people at the top than there are at the bottom. And so that hierarchy is where you sit on that level. If we look at the commoners paragraph, we've got a few words in there as well. Our first word is agricultural, which just means relating to farming. So in this case, living as agricultural labourers meaning more than likely they were farm labourers or had some job to do with farms. We then have acquire, which means to buy or obtain an object for oneself. So in this case, they were able to acquire, so maybe they had some way of getting spears, but the majority of them could only acquire hammers, axes, and scythes, so what they were able to get hold of. And lastly, accessible, which means it's easy to get hold of, basically, easily obtainable or used. And they were easily accessible because they were able to find them within their work. So it was part of their work, they were able to get them. Next, looking at the nobility and upper class paragraph, we have districts. So the king controlled the kingdom, and ealdormen were giving various districts on behalf of the king. And what all that means is that it's an area of the country or a city. So you might have an ealdorman in charge of a city like Jorvik, or you might have them in charge of an area of land. Then you've got professional. Now, professional actually means lots of different things. In this particular term, thanes were the professional military. It means that a person is competent or skilled in that activity. So they are competent and skilled as a military person. Professional can mean lots of other things when using different meanings, like they have a professional job, which means that they need to have a certain amount of training in order to achieve it. They are a professional, which means that they have a certain class of job, or they're being paid to do a certain job. You can have a professional sportsman who is being paid to be a sportsman. They are competent or skilled at that activity. So depending on the way in which it's used can change the meaning, but in this case, is that they are competent or skilled in the military. Our final word in this paragraph is organisations. Now, you've heard of this probably before, but all it is relating to in this case is a group of people with a particular purpose. So the local organisations that deal with men-at-arms and trade routes. And this is those groups of people that have that purpose, that deal with men-at-arms or trade routes. And our final paragraph, and in this paragraph, we've got society. Now, this is hit all the way through. It's in our title, but I kind of saved it for last because I want you to think about this one. This is a really good word. And it's the community of people living in a particular country, region, or having shared customs, laws, and organizations. So this word can be used in lots of different contexts. We could call our school a society because it's a group of people living in the same situation within school, and we have common customs, rules, and organisations, i.e., our school rules. We have assemblies at the same time. Our organisation of lunchtime and such is the same. So you could boil it all the way down to a society in that case, or you could have a wide-reaching one, like the English society and how that works and the laws we follow and the common organisations that we have within that. You could limit it to a religious society and have the ways in which that affects people and have a group of people that are based around this. In this case, this is talking about the Anglo-Saxon Society. We're talking about the society as it was in Anglo-Saxon times. And the last word we've got here is punishment, which I hope you all know is the infliction or imposition of a penalty as a retribution for offence. So it's how you get somebody to give recompense for whatever they've done wrong. So they do something wrong and they're punished for doing that thing wrong, which hopefully should deter them from doing it again. The idea of punishment is to deter people from doing what you don't want them to do. So your short right task for today, I want you to look back, go through the words that we've got. You can pause at different times, write them down, their meaning. And I want you to use the key vocabulary from the model text. And I want you to see how many, I want you to make sentences with them. But I want you to also kind of challenge yourself, see how many of the different key vocab words you can get into one sentence, making sure that sentence still makes sense. No point of doing it if the sentence loses sense because you're trying to cram too many words into it. Also, additional challenge. Do you think you could write a sentence using the key vocab words and include a parenthesis? Remember, a parenthesis can be included in a bracket, surrounded by commas, or with dashes either side. Have a think, try your best, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.